again soon. 3 true school horror stories.
This all happened a few years ago, right at the very end of 8th grade. It was the final day of school, and you know that feeling everyone's buzzing, signing yearbooks, taking selfies, hugging friends goodbye. It's that bittersweet moment when you're half thrilled about summer and half terrified about starting high school. Our middle school was massive, easily over 1,000 students. To keep things from becoming total chaos, the teachers came up with a system. They collected all our yearbooks, passed them from classroom to classroom, and made sure everyone got a chance to sign whoever's they wanted. Theory, it sounded organized, but you can probably guess the flaw in the plan. Anyone could write in anyone's yearbook, even people you'd never met in your life. By the time I finally got my yearbook back at the end of the day, it was crammed with goofy notes, inside jokes from my friends, and signatures from people I vaguely recognized. I was sitting on my bed, flipping through it, laughing at all the ridiculous things my friends had written, when one message just stopped me cold. Right there, beneath the school picture of some kid I didn't recognize at all, was a signature in neat, almost perfect handwriting. Samuel Robinson 3, and under his name. A short, simple message, HAGS, I'll be seeing you again. I just stared at it, completely confused. I'd never spoken to anyone named Samuel Robinson 3. I didn't even know we had a Samuel III in our entire school. It was weird, but I eventually shrugged it off. I figured it was just some prank, or maybe he'd signed the wrong book by mistake. It was the last day of school, after all. Weird stuff happens. That night, my 3 best friends, Kevin, David, and Kieran, came over for one last summer sleepover in my basement. It was our tradition. We stayed up super late, devouring bags of chips, getting way too hyped up on soda, and playing endless rounds of Asterisk, Call of Duty Asterisk. My parents' bedroom was 3 floors up, so we didn't bother trying to be quiet. We were loud, obnoxious, and having the time of our lives. Sometime around 2 in the morning, while we were messing around with my dad's old, dusty rowing machine, we heard a knock. It came from the basement's storm door, the one that leads directly outside to the backyard. It wasn't a loud knock, but it was sharp and distinct. 3 knocks, a short pause, and then 2 more. We all froze, instantly silent. No one ever used that door, except for my dad when he was mowing the lawn. It was practically sealed shut from the inside. Kieran, ever the brave one, broke the silence first. He shouted, "Who's there?" I immediately shot him a death glare. "I in the world would you announce that we were down here?" A few seconds of tense silence passed, and then a voice answered. It was muffled, young, and surprisingly cheerful. It said, "Come around to the back door." We all just looked at each other, totally bewildered. The voice didn't sound angry or deep or threatening. It actually sounded friendly, like it could be one of our classmates, but something about it just felt wrong. My friends, being the impulsive idiots they were, immediately insisted we go check it out. They were convinced it was another friend of ours playing a prank. So, we all crept upstairs as quietly as we could, our hearts pounding in our chests. The house was pitch dark, except for the faint, eerie glow from the single nightlight in the kitchen. When we reached the back door, I could see a shadow standing just outside, illuminated by the dim porch light. I squinted, trying to make out the figure through the narrow glass pane on the door, and my stomach completely dropped. It was a boy, probably our age. He was pale, thin, with short brown hair, and his face was completely expressionless. And then I realized I had seen that face before. It was the exact same face from my yearbook. It was Samuel Robinson 3. He waved a slow, almost polite little wave. My friends still thought it was some kind of elaborate joke. David started reaching for the door handle to open it. I grabbed his arm to stop him and whispered, as urgently as I could, "That's the kid who wrote in my yearbook." Their laughter died instantly. Through the glass, Samuel tilted his head, a small, unnerving smile spreading across his face. Then he motioned with his hand, beckoning for me to come outside. I just shook my head. No way. Instead, I moved over to the kitchen window right beside the door and carefully cracked it open. "Just a tiny inch, Sam," I asked, my voice shaking a little. He nodded, his smile unwavering. "So, you got my message?" he said. His tone was calm, but it sounded strangely rehearsed, like he'd practiced this line. Then he added, "I've been watching you for a long time. I think we could have been great friends." I forced a nervous laugh, trying to play along, pretending this was all normal. But every single instinct in my body was screaming at me to slam the window shut and run. I had to know. "How? How did you find my house?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just kept smiling, that same vacant smile, his eyes fixed on me, unblinking. Before I could say another word, David blurted out, "Dude, you're a freak. Get lost." That was a huge mistake. Samuel's friendly expression instantly vanished. His grin collapsed into a hateful, twisted scowl. He tilted his head again, a small, jerky motion, and hissed, "She hated you too." Then his voice got louder, filled with venom. "All of you should die." We stumbled back in shock as he lunged for the window frame, trying to force it open. I reacted instantly, slamming it shut and fumbling with the lock. He started pounding on the glass with his bare fists, snarling like a wild animal. The sound was deafening, rattling the dishes in the kitchen cabinets. My parents came running down the stairs, shouting, "What's going on? What's all that noise?" The moment they appeared in the kitchen, Samuel turned and bolted, disappearing into the darkness of the backyard. My dad and his boxers sprinted outside after him, but by the time he reached the yard, Samuel was gone. He just vanished. We called the school the next morning, and that's when this whole thing went from terrifying to truly disturbing. The school administrator told us that Samuel Robinson III had been expelled weeks before the end of the year. He wasn't even supposed to be on school property when the yearbooks were being signed. But because the books had been printed earlier in the year, his picture was still in them. That meant he had somehow snuck back into the school on the last day, found my specific yearbook out of hundreds, just to write that one chilling message. And it gets weirder. The school couldn't find any current records for his family after that. The phone number they had was disconnected. The address on file was invalid. It was like he and his family had ceased to exist. The police said there wasn't much they could do without more information. My parents kept all the doors and windows locked for weeks after that, but we never saw Samuel again. Still, every time I look at that old 8th grade yearbook and I see that page with his picture and his signature, I get a cold chill down my spine. Because he didn't just write, "Have a great summer." He wrote, "I'll be seeing you again." And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone and I think I hear quiet footsteps just outside my window, I can't help but wonder if he meant it. This all happened just a few weeks before my college graduation. I had been waiting for that day for years, the last day of senior year. The feeling of freedom, of excitement, that sense that you finally made it. It was supposed to be the best time of my life. My best friend Garrett was one of those guys everyone on campus knew. He was loud, fearless, and always acted like he had something to prove. Seriously, he would fight anyone, anywhere, over anything. I can't even count the number of times his temper got him into serious trouble. But that night, none of us expected how far that attitude would go, or what it would end up costing. There were 6 of us. Me, Garrett, and our friend C, TR. And then our college town had this old, beautiful clock tower right at the center of campus. Every year, it became the unofficial spot for graduating seniors to celebrate. By celebrate, I mean get completely wasted. 10 p.m., the courtyard was packed with hundreds of drunk seniors, all saying their final goodbyes to college life. We were right in the middle of it all, yelling, laughing, and drinking from cheap plastic bottles, thinking we owned the entire night. When the party finally started to die down, we decided to walk back to our off-campus house. It was about a 15-minute walk through dimly lit city streets. The campus was quiet, with just the occasional sound of cars echoing off the old brick buildings. It was around midnight when it happened. As we were crossing the street, this homeless guy appeared out of nowhere, just yelling something completely incoherent. He was twitching and staggering with these wild eyes that never seemed to focus on any one thing. At first, we just figured he was another drunk or high transient. Our city had plenty of them. We tried to just go around him quietly, but Garrett, being Garrett, had other plans. He shouted at the guy to get out of the road and stop messing with people. The man turned toward him slowly, muttering something under his breath, and started walking closer. I grabbed Garrett's arm and told him to just chill out, but he just shrugged me off and yelled even louder. The guy started screaming back at him, waving his arms around and stepping toward us. The rest of us immediately tried to pull Garrett away before things got physical. Thankfully, the homeless man backed off, still yelling nonsense as he stumbled away in the opposite direction. We all laughed about it on the way home, but deep down, I had this weird, unsettling feeling. Something about the man's stare just didn't sit right with me. It was focused. Like he wasn't just Medit. It was like he recognized us somehow. We turned onto our street a few minutes later, but when I glanced back, I froze. The same man was standing at the end of the block, walking slowly, following us. Garrett noticed it too. He just laughed and said, "Guess he wants round two," and started shouting down the street at him again. The guy didn't respond this time. He just kept following, muttering something that sounded like, "You made a big mistake. A big mistake." I told everyone we shouldn't lead him back to our house, should cut through another block, try to lose him. But before we could even decide what to do, Garrett sprinted toward him, yelling like a maniac. The homeless man bolted, disappearing into a dark alley. Garrett came jogging back, looking so proud of himself. We all cursed him out, but he didn't care. He thought the whole thing was hilarious. We finally got home and locked up for the night. I don't remember much after that. Too many shots, too much noise, just a blur of celebration. At some point I ordered food, and maybe an hour later I stumbled outside to grab my DoorDash bag from the porch. The street was dead silent. The air felt heavy and still. As I turned to head back inside, I noticed something. The side gate to our backyard, the one we always kept tied shut with a piece of old, frayed twine, was wide open. I froze right there on the porch. No one had used that gate in months. My drunk brain tried to reason it out. Maybe someone forgot to tie it. Maybe the wind blew it open. But deep down I knew. That guy. Instead of waking up the others, I made the worst decision of my life. I went to check it out myself. The backyard was pitch black, except for a weak dim light coming from the kitchen window. I turned the corner slowly, trying my best to be quiet. That's when I felt it. Something tightened around my neck. A rope. It was rough, frayed, and digging hard into my skin. I tried to scream, but it only made it worse. The more I struggled, the tighter it got. Someone was behind me, pulling with everything they had. I could feel their hot breath against the back of my head, and I could hear these low, grunting noises, like pure animalistic rage. My vision started to blur at the edges. My legs were kicking backward wildly until one of my feet hit something solid, a shin. Maybe, and whoever it was lost their balance for a second. We both fell to the ground hard. The rope loosened just enough for me to gasp for a breath. I rolled over and saw him, the same homeless man from earlier. His face was twisted with fury, his eyes bloodshot and wide open. He lunged at me, clawing at my face, his nails digging deep into my cheek. I shoved him off and scrambled backward, finally screaming for help at the top of my lungs. The man stumbled to his feet, looked at me one last time with that same intense stare, and then ran, disappearing into the darkness between the houses. My friends came rushing out when they heard me yelling. They saw the blood on my neck, the deep scratches on my face, and the rope just lying there in the grass. They called an ambulance right away. At the hospital, the nurse told me I was lucky another few seconds, and the rope would have crushed my windpipe completely. I had to get a few shots and some stitches, and the marks on my neck stayed visible for weeks. The police came, but they didn't find anyone. No fingerprints, no security footage, absolutely nothing. When I told them the attacker was a homeless man from earlier that night, one of the officers exchanged this look with his partner like they'd heard this story before. He pulled me aside and told me quietly, "We've had incidents, similar descriptions. Stay inside for a few days." I moved out of that city a week later, during my graduation ceremony, while everyone else was celebrating. Stood there smiling for photos with bandages on my neck and fresh scratches across my face. Every time I look at those pictures now, I can only think about one thing: that man had followed us for over a mile. He waited until I was completely alone, came through a gate that was tied shut from the inside. So unless he had somehow cut the twine, someone must have untied it for him. When I was in 7th grade, there was this kid in my homeroom named Sven. I'll never forget him, not because we were friends, but because of how strange he was. Quiet, always alone, always watching. Sven sat in the same seat every single day, back corner, farthest from the door. He wore the same outfit too, cargo shorts and an oversized burgundy hoodie. It didn't matter if it was 90 degrees outside, he'd be sweating under that thing, never taking it off. He barely spoke, and when he did, his voice was unusually deep for his age, deep enough that some of the kids made fun of him for it. I didn't know him well, but you couldn't not notice him. There were rumors about him. Someone said they saw him slicing worms with a pocket knife during recess. Another kid swore he saw Sven whispering to the fence that bordered the woods behind our playground. Most people thought he was just weird, not dangerous. But I never liked the way he looked at people. His eyes didn't just look at you, they looked through you. Our school was big, with hundreds of kids per grade. On the last day of school, we had this stupid little tradition where students would sneak into random classrooms to mess around with teachers. It was harmless fun. That afternoon, I happened to be in one of the few classes Sven was also in. Normally, I sat with my friends, but that day, they'd all run off to different rooms, leaving me by myself. Which meant the only familiar face in that room was Sven's. He was sitting in his usual spot, staring down at his desk, tapping his foot hard against the floor, tap, 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 over and over again. It was the first time I'd ever seen him move so much. Every so often, he'd glance around the classroom like he was waiting for something or someone. At first, I tried to ignore it, but the tension was getting weird. There were more kids in the room than usual, some I didn't even recognize, faces I'd never seen all year. Maybe they were from other classes, I thought. Still, something felt off. A few minutes later, our teacher, Ms. Bell, walked to her desk and picked up the classroom phone. She turned her back to us, whispering something I couldn't make out. When she hung up, another teacher appeared at the door. They both stepped outside and started talking quietly, their voices low but urgent. Everyone else in class kept goofing off, but I couldn't stop watching. Ms. Bell's expression had changed. Her face was pale, tight. She looked scared. After maybe 30 seconds, the teachers came back in. They didn't explain anything. They just walked over to a few students, not the ones I recognized, and whispered to them. One by one, those kids got up and followed the teachers out into the hallway. Sven was watching them the entire time, his tapping foot finally still. Miss Bell returned alone a few minutes later. She sat at her desk and shuffled papers like nothing happened. Then, without warning, the fire alarm went off. Everyone jumped. Ms. Bell didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked relieved. She told us to line up and head outside to the field behind the school. As we filed out, I glanced back at Sven. He was still sitting there, completely still, just staring at the door. I hesitated, but the teacher shouted for everyone to move, so I did. Outside, hundreds of students gathered in lines, buzzing with confusion. Some were laughing, thinking it was another endeavor or prank, but the teachers looked terrified. They weren't joking, they weren't smiling, they were counting heads, whispering to each other, constantly glancing back at the building. And then I saw it. From where I stood, I could see the second-floor windows. One of them had movement, a figure walking past the glass fast, but no one was supposed to be inside. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was just a reflection, but it wasn't. A few minutes later, the sound of sirens cut through the noise. Police cars, then more. One after another pulling into the parking lot, lights flashing, officers jumping out with urgency. Some ran into the building, others spread out around the perimeter. No one told us what was happening. We just stood there, confused, anxious, waiting. Eventually, a voice over the intercom told us school was dismissed early and we had to call our parents to pick us up. No buses, no explanation. That night, my parents told me what the school had told them. Apparently, a group of kids who didn't even go to our school had somehow gotten inside the building that day. They were caught carrying tools, things like gasoline canisters, lighters, wire cutters. Rumor was they'd been planning to set a fire or cause chaos before everyone left for summer break. And the person who let them in was Sven. He'd supposedly opened the side gate to the playground during recess, the same fence he always stood beside. Security cameras caught him leading the group in through that gate. When the teachers realized something was wrong, they pulled a few of the intruders out quietly and triggered the fire alarm to evacuate everyone before things got worse. It never saw Sven again after that day. He didn't come back the following year. School told us his family had moved away, but no one knew where. His house was empty a week later. Sometimes I still think about that afternoon, the look on Miss Bell's face, the unfamiliar kids, the moment I saw movement in the window after the evacuation. And every time I do, I get the same cold feeling in my stomach. Because I know for a fact, when we all went outside, Sven stayed inside. And whatever he was waiting for that day, I don't think he ever left that classroom.